I mean, what Trey?
I heard about Rick, I'm sorry. Sorry about your brother, Darren.
Yo, Trey!
He said he can't come out now.
What's up with you?
What's up with me? What's up with you? What you getting ready to do?
What you think I'm getting ready to do?
I think you're gonna go do something very stupid, something you're gonna regret, Darren, and I don't think it's gonna make you feel any better. If that's what you think, you're wrong. It's not gonna make you feel better.
It's gonna make me feel a lot better.
Darren, it's not gonna make you feel... Come here, man, Darren, that's just what they want you to do, man.
Who the fuck is they?
Now, this is one of those deleted scenes in the iconic movie Boyz in the Hood. This scene comes right after where Trey tells Doughboy to meet him in 5 minutes at his crib. This is after, the tragic death of Ricky. Trey tells Doughboy to meet him at his crib in 5 minutes. And this is a scene that's supposed to come, thereafter. But for some reason, they didn't add this scene. But this scene right here is poignant, especially when it comes to this exchange between Doughboy and Trey's father, because we already know Trey's father represents, this pillar of wisdom, this figure that, you look at as a person or a father figure that one would want in their household in regards to, a childhood. You live in a life where you're in ruin in the city, and you have that cycle of, the fatherless home. So he's one that is looked at as that. That's why that's like a running theme throughout the movie, where you see that Trey is the one that's saved, and Trey is the one that walks with wisdom and understands what's best for him because he has that. And you see the difference between those who don't have that and those who do, just in terms of, difference between Trey and, someone like a Ricky or a Doughboy. Even though Ricky was blessed because of his talents and whatnot, he played the role of the sacrificial lamb. Like, he was the one that was sacrificed, the innocence of a person that's, on his way out. He's supposed to make it out of that underground, that labyrinth, which is the hood. Because, the esoteric element is stark just when it comes to the aspect of, the underground or the sacrificial element or the death element, because that's there. It's a reason why you have the cat that gets killed by Doughboy, even though he's not the one that pulled the trigger, but he's wearing black, red, and white, as well as the guy that pulled the trigger. He's wearing black, red, and white, and they're in the red and black car, and he's wearing a bull's cap. The bull's cap is significant, and that's a reoccurring theme throughout the entertainment industry, just when it comes to what it's connected with. It's connected with Baal. That's what it's connected with. Baal, the god of sacrifice, believe it or not. That's why the bull is significant. The esoteric theme, reoccurrence, is always something that they push throughout the entertainment industry. So the hood represents a labyrinth, because the Minotaur, the bull, is someone who is that death figure. And just when it comes to the aspect of Doughboy, he represents like that Cain aspect, the aspect of one who knows his fate and who's comfortable with his fate in regards to the death aspect. This is why he says, someone might smoke me. And then 2 weeks later, he dies after he has that conversation with Trey. Trey represents the wisdom aspect. He rises above all the fray. He rises above all the dark aspect, and he's able to conquer. And that's what he represents. So you have this, this form of esotericism just when it comes to what plays out. And that's just for another video. I just wanted to go through that just a little bit. But the poignancy of that deleted scene when it comes to this exchange between Trey's father and Doughboy is the usage of the word they, the ambiguity of the word they, because he says, hey, that's what they want you to do, man. Furious tells Doughboy that's what they want him to do. But there would be no reason for Doughboy to ask who the fuck is they, because he knows that he's going to kill, Ricky's killers. The reason why he asks who the fuck is they is because he knows that Furious is not talking about Ricky's killers when he says they. He's talking about the people at large in regards to the power structure, the elite, because it's in context with, what Furious was talking about in regards to gentrification, understanding that the white man or the people in power is who is actually, controlling all these things. when it comes to these hoods and these people on this checkerboard per se. You know, it's like we're proverbial pawns of the white man's plans. That's why he said this is what they want you to do. They want us to kill each other. You know, they want black on black crime, and that's something that's a sentiment that's been broached throughout years, and there is some truth to it. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge, you know, our faults in it, holding ourselves accountable. Yes, they give us the guns and the drugs. They, you know, it comes through the pipeline, but we're using it. It's one thing for us to say, "Oh, they giving it to us." Okay, if we acknowledge that they're giving it to us, then we should have a choice to not use it, right? But that's the sentiment. Hey, they giving us all these drugs and guns. You know, it's a drugs, it's a liquor store on every corner of the community. You know, that type of sentiment, and that was broached throughout the movie, and it held true. But at the same time, you know, it's just an understanding in regards to, you know, looking beyond that and holding yourself accountable. But yes, that was poignant because that's what it all boiled down to in regards to the usage of the word they. The they was going into the power structure at large. It wasn't talking about, you know, Ricky's killers per se. It was more so like a twofold they. He said that's what they want you to do. Right? That's what they want you to do. Because yes, not only does Ricky's killers want him to go into that type of mode where they can entrap him, even though they didn't. They got, you know, they got killed by Doughboy. But it just goes into that aspect of, you know, the broader element where it's the power structure, right? It's the power structure. You know, that's what it's about. So, you know, it's just certain scenes and certain movies that really, really tell, and it's really revelatory. You see, Boys in the Hood is one of the greatest movies of all time, if not the greatest movie of all time, because it really captured every element of, you know, the experience growing up in the hood as a so-called black man, as a so-called young black boy, so-called young black girl. It really captures the essence of the hood. And the hood is like a proverbial labyrinth. This is why it was captured in the movie. It was captured on film. The hood represents the labyrinth, like there's no way out. And just when it comes to these elements of the archetype, where you have this, you know, this wisdom archetype, which is Trey, and then you have the innocent archetype, which is Ricky, the innocent archetype, but also talent, you know, also one who is, you know, naive to a degree, but he's a seeker. That's Trey as well. Trey is a seeker. Trey is, you know, the ongoing learner. And he's also the innocent one, you know, he's the virgin, he's clean. But he understands that he's around all of this darkness. And some of it he's, you know, I'm not going to necessarily say associated with, but it's around him to the point where, you know, he can be submerged in it. And, you know, he can engulf himself in it. This is why he was indecisive about, you know, avenging his friend Ricky. Just when it comes to him being in a car with Doughboy and he changed his mind because of his innate understanding of wisdom, as well as this is not me. You know, even though this is around me, I'm not going to become a product of my environment. That's why that scene was so potent, because it represented the difference between, you know, that archetype of a so-called black man who is willing to just say no, and I'm not going to, you know, go down that path, because you have a lot of that. But the cycle doesn't end. You have a lot of people who are just willing to follow. But he used his own mind. It just showed that archetype of a so-called black man who's willing to, you know, walk on his own too and follow his own path, as opposed to, you know, being sucked in and going down, you know, that rabbit hole per se, that rabbit hole of death, or just going and walking with the wrong crowd. Even though he's someone who was cool with Doughboy, he was very close with Doughboy. At the same time, those are two different people, and he understood that. It's almost like the yin to the yang. And Doughboy understood it, which is why he respected it and he acknowledged it. He said, I know why you went out that car. I know why you left the car. Because Doughboy respected who Trey was. Doughboy understood that Trey was not, you know, he was not like him. You know what I mean? And it really showed as well when it comes to that scene where, you know, the cop pretty much is provoking Trey. You know, when they get stopped, when Trey and Ricky get stopped by the cop, and then the same black cop that was harassing Furious in the beginning of the movie, or not necessarily harassing, but he was just, you know, going back and forth in a little smart tone, and just fucking with Furious in the beginning of the movie. It's kind of like that aspect of what you would see later, like that predictive aspect of, okay, there's gonna be something with these two later on in the movie. That's why they showed that dynamic with the black cop and Furious, and where the black cop, he lends his hand to Trey, and Furious tells Trey to go in the house and don't give him that handshake or whatever. That's like a telltale for what's to come in regards to what took place, where Trey was stopped by the cop and he starts to cry because the cop has the gun to his face. Trey is crying because he understands that he's being profiled just based off of being a product of his environment. But at the same time, he's not necessarily a product because he has his own mind. It's just that on the outset, he's a product, which is why the cop looked at him like, oh, you were one of these rolling 60s, or you this, or you that. You know what I mean? So it's just a lot to this movie. I know I'm going on a tangent, but it's just a lot, man. And that's why I say this movie is the greatest movie of all time, because it really showed you a lot, especially when it comes to the spiritual element. The pagan element, the esoteric element, that's all there. We could really go through it, but this is just a little brief, So yeah, man, I just wanted to go through this because look, like this scene right here is connected, or you can parallel this with that deleted scene where he says that's what they want you to do. It's like a reminder of the they that he was talking about is the power structure at large, because he's opposed to it. He plays that opposer to the power structure, understanding that yes, I know I live in a hood, and I know that we're subject to all this craziness when it comes to these young black men shooting at each other and killing each other. But at the same time, I understand that it's a trap. We're entrapped, we're ensnared, and it's all at the master plan. It's all at the behest of the so-called white man. That's just how Furious is looking at it. That's why he says, this is what they want us to do. And it's crazy because the antithesis to that is in scripture. It's like you train your child at home, you grieve the enemy, right? We already know who the enemy is, and we already know who those commandments were lended to, just in regards to, the understanding as far as so-called black people being descendants of the Israelites and the power structure being so-called white man. We know that the enemy is, we already know. So when it comes to that, it's like an antithesis to that sentiment. You train your child, or you teach your child, you grieve with the enemy. You teach your child at home, you grieve with the enemy. And there's so much to that aspect of teaching your child at home. It's not just talking about schooling, but just you giving him that wisdom and that insight and that understanding that can prepare him for life, which is before him going into the indoctrination aspect of school and just life at large. Just what's before him at large. So it's like, you give him that leg up. This is why Trey was able to, he was able to rise above all of that. He went to college. He was able to, have a great life afterwards. And he was right across from, his lady, his woman. He was the virgin as well as his lady. So they were pure. They represent that aspect of purity. It's so much to this movie, man. And I definitely will be doing something on this. I just wanted to just give a little brief coverage, just commentary a little bit.